You must understand that Bibles were not printed, quotes, until about 500 or 600 years ago for the first time. We had the Gutenberg Bible, you know. A printed Bible, when Bibles were first being printed, was worth way more than gold. There were so precious few copies, and they were done just one slab of paper at a time. And remember, they didn't make paper in great big paper mills. Bibles were not only scarce, they were expensive. See, if you could get one. Not only this, when Bibles were first being printed, not everyone was agreed out there as to whether it was going to be Martin Luther's German translation or whether it was going to be King James's translation or who. People still not agreed. Okay? The Bible has not always been available to people. We need to know this. You and I can go down to any discount store here and get a Bible. $2 or $3. You can go check in a motel room, get one free. I shouldn't tell you that. No, believe it or not, the Gideons put them there in hopes that somebody will take one. Yeah, yes they do. And God bless them. Today we take the Bible for granted. We should not. When people began to have a Bible in their hands, let's go back 150 years here in America, okay? Let's go back to the time of the Civil War. The only Bible people had, we're not just talking about Protestants, even the few Catholics in this country at that time. The only Bible people had was a King James Bible. They had a Cruden's Concordance, and that was it. You couldn't run down and get an NIV, NASB, New Revised Standard, American Revised Standard. Couldn't get it. Those were not handy. Why? Because they hadn't been done. Translations hadn't been done. Revisions hadn't been done. Most recent discoveries of ancient manuscripts had not been compared, and on and on and on and on. 150 years ago, people had the King James Bible. And basically everybody out there read it, practiced it, and used it the same way. Well, how was that? Please listen. If you were Methodist, if you were Baptist, if you were Nazarene, if you were whatever, this is how you did it. Catholic, Protestant, doesn't matter. You proof texted. What do we mean by that? You would be surprised, you would be amazed to find out how many people believe that when the Bible was actually written, it was written Psalm 104, verse 1. These are man-made. This is applied 1,000 and more years after the fact. It's not written by chapters and verses. It's just a writing, call it a book, and that was it. And as people got a Bible in front of them, they saw chapters and verses, and so they would read a verse. And the tendency in the mind is to let the verse stand alone. What's before it stands by itself, and what's after it stands by itself. And so we read the Bible in bits and pieces. In today's terminology, we call that sound bite. A sound bite. Okay? It's a dishonest way to get your news. They go out and they meet some politician, somebody, and they hold a microphone in front of him and they say, please tell us your view, your view, your view. And when it gets on the news, they have 3 words from him and say, that's what he said. Tain't so. Don't believe it. Not a word of it. They take it out of context. All right? And everybody does it. Everybody did it. People still do it today. They proof text because everybody does it. Didn't know there was any other way to do it. Virtually every denomination exists because of proof texting. And you got your happy choice of 500, 600 of them out there. We're talking about Christians. Forget about Buddhists and Muslims and all the rest of them. People differ in the Scripture because one seizes on this verse and another one seizes on that verse. and they turn it into the whole Bible, or the whole denomination, or the whole doctrine, or the whole whatever. The word doctrine simply means teaching. Most of the doctrines that you may be familiar with in your religious experience, your background, were arrived at by proof texting. I come from a long line of Presbyterian and Methodist preachers. Now on the Presbyterian side, they were from Knox and Calvin persuasion, if you go back in early church history, okay? And Knox and Calvin seized upon predestination. Now you have to come to Alabama to understand what that means and how it's played out. Because you see, the Presbyterians and the Baptists, they are Calvinists. But the Methodists are not. They come from another side. A totally different reading. They seized on other verses and turned that into the world. Okay? Now, if you are a predestinator, a Calvinist Christian, then you do not want to live in a state that allows gambling. Why not? Come on, I'm asking you, I'm looking at you, and I'm asking you folks to think with me. We're talking about something very important here.
The winners are already known.
Because nothing is by chance. Everything is predestined. And if you gamble, you're saying you don't believe that God has predestined everything. What I'm trying to say to you is that people do today what they do, think the way they think, behave the way they behave, and they don't even know why. And it goes way back, and way back, and way back, and way back. And most Baptists don't know what a Calvinist is, even though they're one of them. They don't know how, okay? The same thing can happen to you and me. We all come from some background. Somebody taught us something. The question is, where did they get those ideas? Well, they told you and me they got them out of the Bible. But when you begin to examine how most of us have been taught various doctrines and teachings and concepts and ideas, you will see that they come down to us by proof texting. Now, proof texting works like this. I go over here and I find a verse, whatever I'm studying. What happens when a man dies or whatever, okay? I find a verse. I go somewhere else in the Bible and I find a verse. And I go somewhere else and I find a verse. And I stack them all up and I say, that's what the Bible says. Now it may or it may not be what the Bible says. How do we find out? We see if in the choosing of our text and building theologically what we call a construct, a theological construct, okay? What we do is go back to see if the person who's gathering, collecting these texts, and that may be you or me or somebody else, what we do is find out is, did they lift it out of context? If I read the context in which that verse was, from which that verse was taken, it may say something altogether different than they have made it to say. All right? Altogether different. What we want to do is learn, you, me, and anybody we want to sit down to and talk to intelligently about prophecy or whatever in the book, we want to get on the same track. And the way to do that is to understand if we're going to deal with the subject of, let's make sure we are reading what we're reading contextually and not proof textually. Now this is very important, folks. It's important because you and I are going to be looking at some of these visions here. Let me give you an example. We're kind of focusing on the book of Daniel for a while here today. The second chapter in the book of Daniel was a dream given to King Nebuchadnezzar. Who's Nebuchadnezzar? King of Babylon. Was he a Jewish prophet? No, he was not. But the record is in Daniel's book. We trust that Daniel is the one who's telling us the story. All right? Now you remember the vision that was given to Nebuchadnezzar, how he saw this great metallic image, head of gold, breasts and arms of silver, and so forth. The great metal man and feet of iron and clay. And he sees it, and it troubles him in his dream, and he wakes up. But when he wakes up, how much can he remember? So he calls for the wise men, soothsayers, magicians, and astrologers, and he said, I've had a dream. Tell me what I saw and tell me what it means. Well, you tell us what you saw, and we'll tell you what it means. Those are the proof texters. Those are the guys who say, hey, proof texting is wonderful because you can make it say anything you want to. All right? You tell us what you saw, we'll tell you what it means. Great. I'd like that job. No, the king said, I can't remember. But you better find out, or it's off with your head. This is where Daniel comes into the picture. And Daniel says, O king, live forever. Could not the wise men, soothsayers, magicians, and astrologers tell the king the vision? No. The dream? No. Daniel takes no credit to himself. He says, but there is a God in heaven that revealeth secrets and maketh known to the king. All right? Are you listening? You're awake. That maketh known to the king what shall be in the latter days. I meet thousands of people who want to tell me that Daniel chapter 2 is about 606 BC. I'm saying, give me a break. What are they doing? They're proof texting. They're majoring on minors. They're spending forever focusing on what? Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, Rome. Old stuff. Way back yonder stuff. But what is it really about? Time of the end. God has shown the king what shall be in the latter days. Well, yeah, but he told the king years this head ago. Okay. Let me ask you something. In the book of Revelation, is anything said about Babylon at all? Come on. Yes or no? Yeah. Somehow we've got to get things together here, folk. We've got to be able to get things together without doing despite to the Word. So that's what we're going to be attempting to do here this afternoon now. You got your thinking caps on. Don't let this one go past you. The things that were shown to Daniel are from ground level, looking out like this. It's from the earthly perspective. Daniel's visions are an outline, prophetic outline of nations and their interaction with one another. And this one is going to do this, and that one's going to do that, and this one will do this, and these 10 kings will do that. Daniel's visions are from the earthly perspective. The visions that were given to John focus primarily from the heavenly perspective. Let me illustrate this for you. Watch. Daniel's first vision. Daniel 7. This is the first comprehensive. This is the broad overview. This is the all-inclusive vision. In this vision, 4 to 6 verses. 4 to 6 verses. This is a large chapter. 4 to 6 verses are given to the subject of the judgment. I saw till thrones were cast down, King James says. Actually, what it says in the original, I saw till thrones were set in place, and the Ancient of Days came. Listening? The books were opened, and the judgment was set. And thousands and 10,000s were brought near before him. And then Daniel says, and I saw one like unto the Son of Man was brought near before him. 4 to 6 verses in Daniel's comprehensive vision are devoted to the judgment. Watch. When you get to the book of Revelation, 4 to 6 verses are expanded into 16 chapters of Revelation, from chapter 4 to chapter 19. Daniel's perspective, the visions given to him are so that you and I, who are earthbound, you and I who are down here at this level, this perspective, we're looking out and we say, well, what is this all about? And who's doing that? And why is he doing that? And who do I keep my eyes on out here? There's so much going on. Daniel's visions tell us who to watch out there. Who's doing what? And how does this relate to? And how does it relate to? John's visions are from the other perspective. When you get to chapter 4, the angel says, and there was a door opened in heaven, and a voice said to me, come up here, and I'm going to show you the things which must be hereafter. And then what happens is, there's the throne, and one sits on the throne, and there are 24 more thrones around about, and 4 living creatures, and thousands of angels. And the books are open, chapter 5, verse 1, and the judgment is set. So we must understand, God has given us information from 2 directions. From up there looking down, and from down here looking out and looking up. Now if you savor this information, if you appreciate what's going on here, God has ensured that we know where we are in 3 dimensions and 4. What is the 4th dimension? Length, breadth, and height make 3 dimensions. We all live in a 3-dimensional universe. What's the 4th dimension? Time. And God has ensured that we know where we are in space and time. He does this for the last generation, something He has never done for any generation before. Not for Abraham. Not even for Jesus. Oh, wait a minute. No. Listen to Jesus. No man knows the day and the hour, not the angels, no man, not even the Son of Man, but my Father only. Time is something that only God can see into, that only God can know. And He has retained that privilege, that prerogative unto Himself. He has not allowed a man, woman, or generation before us to know the time, comprehend it. But what happens at the time of the end is God draws back the curtain. God unlocks the book. God loosens the lips of the prophets. And we do what? We see. We comprehend. My caution to you here is that you drive yourself beyond proof texting. I really ought to leave this alone. I might live another day. I really ought to leave this alone. But you travel as widely as I do, you meet as many people as I do, and you see the hang-ups that people have because all their lives they've been taught this. Yes, but have you ever stopped to look at it? Let me give you an example. Let's make it real, okay? We were doing a study in one seminar on the 1260 days in the book of Revelation. And somebody stood up and they were very unhappy. And you know that's not so. And I said, well, why don't you fill us in here? We know that it's 1260 years. And I said, I've read it and I don't believe it says 1260 years. Yes, but we know each day is a year. I said, we do? Yes, we go over to Ezekiel and we go over here and we know a day is a year. I said, yes, but we're in the book of Revelation. What license do we have to go over there and say that belongs here? And does it really fit? And by the way, did you ever really read Ezekiel 4:6? And Numbers 14:34? No, it doesn't say 1260 years. We know it's 1260 years because the beast is the papacy. I said, oh, does it say that?
That's what writes it.
Does it say that? No, it doesn't say that. We say that. Somebody says that. Well, we know it's the papacy. Well, how do we know that? Well, because from 538 to 1798, that's 1260 years. You see, it's very difficult to reason with people who already know. Are you listening? Please. And on and on and on. This is 1260 years and this is the papacy. And we know the deadly wound was in 1798. And I said, well, I understand. But let me leave you with this. In the book of Revelation, what it actually says is this. I saw a beast come out of the sea. He had 7 heads and 10 horns. Okay? There were crowns on his horns. But what was on his heads? The names of what? Blasphemy. Now, blasphemy is what happens in the church house, not the White House. Crowns are what happens in the State House. The 10 horns represent what? State power. The 7 heads represent what? Religion. Churchcraft. All right? Now this is what it says. I saw one of his heads wounded as it were unto, come on, death. If you'll look at the Greek, look at the margin there, you'll see that what it says, I saw one of his heads slain unto death. But his deadly wound was what? Healed. And all the world did what? Wondered. Stood in amazement of the beast, and they said, who can make war with the beast? All right. Then you'll see that the next verse says, and he continued, or he had power for 1260 days, or 3.5 years, or 40 and 2 months. Okay? Please listen. The 1260 days don't come before the deadly wound is healed. They come after the deadly wound is healed. Now, I wish I could look at you and tell you that he was so happy he sat down smiling from ear to ear. He wasn't happy. He got up and left. You and I want to avoid these kinds of experiences if we can. For ourselves, for others. We want to be very careful that we never become so cocksure of ourselves that there's no room to learn anything else. We have to be very careful here. We need a humble and teachable spirit. And I ask the Lord to give me that, and I ask the Lord to give the people who come to a seminar like that same spirit. Doesn't mean we're going to get all the answers here. I don't have all the answers. Well, here's what we want to do. Today, you and I use as common expressions today words that 50 years ago had not been invented. Morphing, cloning. If I talk to you about morphing today, most everybody knows what we mean. We mean something that is in the process of changing from one state to another, right? We're not talking about Alabama to Mississippi. One state of being to another. All right? We're talking about morphing. So you've got all your antennas up and you're watching. In Daniel's first vision, he sees 4 beasts. 1, 2, 3. Now I'm going to separate the 4th one. Why? Because Daniel separated the fourth one. And he said, this one was unlike the others that I had seen. He was different. Now there ought to be a clue right there for us. We ought to be listening. This one is different. And this one has 10 horns. All right? Now when he gets to verse 7 and verse 8 of Daniel 7, this fourth animal is cruel. This is not the King James. Terrible. Great. Has large iron teeth, crushed and ate what to kill, walked on whatever, stamped, it says. This fourth animal was different from any I had seen before. And it has 10 horns. So watch. I have 1, 2, 3, and then I have this diverse beast. And I have these 10 horns. And then I have something else. The little horn. Now these are the basic elements of the vision. Except we're told what the beast does, and we keep reading in the vision, we find out what the little horn does.
He's war against the saints.
He wears out the saints. He thinks to change time law. He does what else? He speaks great words against the Most High. On and on. There's a whole catalog of things here that the little horn does. But the little horn is riding the beast. The little horn does not exist in and of himself. That is, he is exercising himself because the beast is there. All right? Don't miss this. We're looking at the context. We're trying to understand what's going on here. Now, we're going to jump forward, leap forward, you and I. If you have a Bible, you can turn there if you want to. I can put it on the screen. That's what I really ought to do. Shame on me. Ain't he pretty? Now here comes our word, morphing. So you watch this. John, this is Revelation 13, verse 1. I stood on the sand of the sea. I saw a beast rise out of the sea, 7 heads and 10 horns. On his horns 10 crowns, on his heads the name of blasphemy. Now the beast that I saw was like a leopard. He had the feet of a bear, and he had the mouth of a... Hey, where have we met these characters before? Where have we met these characters before? Yeah, but the elements are here. There's the lion, there's the bear, and there's the leopard. But when we get to Revelation 13, this is the first beast coming out of the sea. Okay? These 3 beasts are what? Morphed into one. I'm going to suggest to you, challenge you, that the 4th beast of Daniel 7 is the first beast of Revelation 13. Now, if you won't buy it, then I'm going to ask you to read chapter 13, and with your own pen, pencil, paper, you write down everything that it says about this beast and everything that he does, and go back to Daniel 7 and read everything that the 4th beast and the little horn do, and you'll see point for point for point for point, including the time. He makes war on the saints, on and on and on and on and on. We're going to morph here. We're going to morph the first 3 beasts of Daniel's first vision into this 4th beast. But remember what we saw, that only 4 to 6 verses in chapter 7 were somehow expanded into 16 chapters? We're going to take the few verses in Daniel 7 that are given to the diverse beast and the little horn, and now we're going to enlarge them. We're enlarging here. Well, why are we doing that? Well, because if you're at the earthly level, the earthly perspective, you're looking out here and wondering who all these people are and what they're doing and why they're doing it. But we want to know from the heavenly perspective what's going on. We want to know how heaven up there, looking down on what's going on down here, how heaven views it. This is why when you get into Daniel 7, you have the three beasts, and right away you move to the fourth beast, and then right away you move to the little horn. And then judgment opens, it says, verse 9, chapter 7 of Daniel. Ancient of Days comes, books open, judgment set. Verse 11, I beheld then, because the voice of the words which the horn spake, I beheld even till the beast was slain, his body destroyed and given to the burning flame. This little horn power, this diverse beast power, is exercising himself, is playing his role on the stage of earth history. He is speaking, he is doing, he is wearing out the saints, he is doing these awful things while the judgment is sitting in heaven. The judgment is sitting, and he's down here doing this. And Revelation 13 is an enlargement from up there looking down here, telling you and me, watch, listen. And this is what you're going to see. This is what you're going to hear. So we're morphing here. From 3 to 4, and from 4 now, we've got this composite beast right here. And the dragon, chapter 12, the previous chapter, who is the dragon? That old devil, the serpent, and Satan. The dragon gives him his power, his seat, and great authority. There are going to be human organizations, human powers, human beings down here in the time of the end that are going to be manipulated by whom?
Satan.
Where do they get their power? Will they have power? Now I saw one of his heads as it were wounded to death. His deadly wound was healed. And all the world stands in amazement. The heads have what on them? The names of blasphemy. That is a religious term that has to do with church. What is the definition for blasphemy? Give me Bible. Well, I won't disagree with you, but there's a good Bible definition of blasphemy, and it's in the Gospels. Jesus is out teaching and preaching, and the Jews come up and they want to stone him. And Jesus said, for what good work do you stone me? And they said, for a good work we stone thee not, but because thou, but for blasphemy, because thou being a man makest thyself to be what? God. So what is blasphemy?
Making yourself to be God.
It is taking to oneself rights, privileges, titles, worship, praise that belong to whom? God alone. When Jesus did it, was he saying point blank, I am a divine being? Absolutely. You may not agree, but I happen to believe he was God in the flesh. See? I just can't see it any other way. Now, this wounded head, how many of them are there? 7. This wounded head looks like he's dead and gone, but he's revived. So, are we going to go out and start discussing Ronald Reagan or Bill Clinton or who? Who are we going to be looking at? Are we going to be looking at political powers? No. We're going to be looking at what? Religious powers.
What about the G7?
The woman, doesn't the woman ride the beast? That's what
It's not the G7.
Okay.
The G7 is part of the 10 after 3 get kicked out.
Doesn't the woman ride the beast, and the woman represents like a church?
Yeah, but that's in 17. We're in 13. I can't let you jump ahead. You'll get confused. No. If we want to try and understand, get anything we can out of what's going on here, contextually, we're not looking at political powers. We're not looking at Russia. We're not looking at America. We're not looking at the European Union. What are we looking at? We're looking at religious entities. How many of them?
7.
How many of the heads was wounded unto death?
1.
So we're looking for 1 out of 7. And whoever or whatever is represented by the 1 out of 7, he is miraculously healed, and there is another consequence. He is evidently of such stature among the 7 that with his restoration, his healing, the whole world takes note. So, please, I've listened and I've read, and I know 100 different interpretations here. But I'm going to share this one with you. And if it's incorrect, I reserve the right to be, mistaken. But here we go. If we're going to take a historical perspective here and look back to see forward, we can say, well, one of those heads represents the Roman Catholic, the papal system. We can say that. A lot of people do. Only they turn the whole beast into the papacy. Everything in the world becomes the papacy. But let's look at one of these heads. And if we look back into church history and we look back into the history of the papal power, the papacy, what can we say about it? Was there a time in papal history when she experienced a, quotes, deadly wound? What would that be? The Reformation time. Now, what was the Reformation? It really was a revolution. It should not be called a reformation. It should be called a revolution. What was going on there?
Truth.
Yeah. But let's, at the most basic level, here's what's happening. You have a schism. You have a dividing. You have a church that is an entity. It's unto itself, and it has a hierarchical power, and its word is the word, okay? But when we have this Reformation revolution, what happens? The church is what?
Power.
Divided, okay? And now we have lots of people, not a few people, we have lots of people who break away. This was a protestation. That's why it's called the Protestant Reformation. This protestation was a protest against what?
False teaching.
It's a protest against the behavior of Rome. And what was the behavior of Rome?
Persecution.
What is the position, the church's position with regards to the Pope at this time in history? That the Pope is a God on earth. Now I'm quoting, okay? That he stands in the place of God. And there's about 50 to 100 of these quotations out there. And Martin Luther comes along and they have this great disagreement in Germany. And what was the disagreement? Because the Pope down in Rome wanted to build a magnificent new palace called St. Peter's Cathedral. The Pope wanted a new house, and he wanted a palace grander than any king in Europe. And it takes money to build a palace. And so, what the Pope did in that day was send folks out selling indulgences. And what was an indulgence? An indulgence was, for $1 or $2, you can buy forgiveness for sins you haven't yet committed.
For other people.
Get out of purgatory, too.
For
Relative.
Yeah, it's a long story. But there were lots of honest-hearted people in the church who saw through this and said, somebody's gone too far down the runway. This was the Protestant Reformation. This is what it was about. It wasn't because there was a Roman church. It was because the church had become arrogant and proud and corrupted. All right? Luther wasn't out to start up some new denomination. But they kicked him out on his ear and he had no choice. And so Luther's followers became Lutherans. Now, if you go back to the papal perspective, the Catholic perspective of these events, what they say is, we are the true church, we're the mother church, and all these who left us are the departed children of the true mother. But we know that the day will come when the departed children will come home.
Deadly wound is healed.
So, if symbolically the deadly wound would, say, represent this schism, this dividing, this deadly wound to the, quotes, spiritual head, blasphemous head, then a healing of that wound would represent what? A time when what? When what dealt the wound was healed.
In the news.
A time would come when what? The departed children would do what? Come home. Now, with that view, that perspective, one might conclude that, boy, it must be the time of the end because who's going home? How many times do you want me to do this? I mean, do you want to talk about the Anglican Church, the Church of England, the Episcopalians in America? You want to talk about them? They have joined the Catholic Church. They have now put Anglican ministers under the head of the Bishop of Rome. How many times do you want me to do this? You want me to talk about the Lutherans? 4 years ago, they went back to Rome. How many times do you want to do this? But let's go a step further. If this perspective, if this view, if this interpretation, if you will, has anything at all to do with reality, then I'm going to make a prediction based upon that scenario. That in the very near future, sometime during the time of the end, sometime in here, when the one world order what are we doing here? We're putting everybody together. Are we putting governments together? We're going to put religions together too. That at some time in the future, when we get this beastie all together and take a good look at him, somebody's going to say, we really ought to have one voice speaking for us, and we elect oh no, that would never happen. I mean, the Buddhists would never allow the Pope of Rome to speak for them. Hey, you better wake up. Oh, the Hindus would never, you better wake up. Oh, the Muslims would, you better wake up.
All meeting together. Fatima, they had a vote.
Oh yes, but the Pope is dying.
Is he like the 39th one?
I don't know.
Seems like I've heard that. The next guy.
Something like that. Just a minute and I'll take your hand. There's a flip side to this coin. And boy, I don't want this on tape.
I was going to ask you if you have this on tape.
There's a flip side to this coin. What if this fellow who's the present Pope What if it looks like he's going to die? I mean, we're doing a what if here. What if it looks like he's going to draw his last breath? What if everybody in the world is praying? Because he's such a worthy person and he's so beloved and he's so, I mean, for your information, he speaks, reads, and writes 52 languages.
Don't you think he's too old, though?
He stands at the head of an organization that is older than any 20 empires put together. I mean, empires come and go. The papacy has been here forever. That's why kings and presidents fly from all over the world and get down on their knees in front of him. And are you listening? We're just doing what if. What if this fellow looks like he is going to die and a miracle occurs and he is... No, I didn't say that. You didn't hear that here. Because if it doesn't happen, you'll say...
He was already shot once.
Yeah, but we're talking about something here that's going to happen in the context of here. This is the context. And in order to get this context, we first have to have the waters troubled, people in great turmoil, and we have to have this and this and this, and we have to have the wings plucked and the... Okay, we're getting there. We got to have the bear showing himself and... No. We got a ways to go. I'm just asking you to keep your eyes and ears open. They, meaning the world, worship the dragon. That's the devil, which gave power to the beast. They worship the beast, saying who's like the beast and who's able to make war with him. Now this word worshipped here in the text is in the Greek. It means they bowed down before. They accepted him as the authority, as the power over them. All right? They worshiped the beast and they said, who's like the beast? Who's able to resist City Hall? And there was given unto him a mouth speaking great things. Have you heard this before anywhere? Little horn. Mouth speaking great things. And what does blasphemy mean? He makes himself to be what? Yeah. And power or authority, it actually says in the original, given unto him to continue how long? 40 and 2 months, 1260 days, times and a half, 3.5 years. When the deadly wound is healed, whoever it is and whatever it is and whenever it takes place, when the deadly wound is healed, we can expect this power to go on for 3.5 years. Literal years, I believe. Real time. 40 and 2 real months, I believe. But that's just the way I read it. And he opened his mouth in blasphemy against God to blaspheme his name, his tabernacle. Do you see this tabernacle? That is temple. Sanctuary. And them that dwell in heaven. So if he's going to blaspheme his tabernacle, he has to show up where? Where's the tabernacle situated? Jerusalem. This whatever has to get to Jerusalem. And he will get there. Somehow we have to wind up in Jerusalem, right here. And them that dwell in heaven. Verse 7. And it was given unto him to make war with the saints and overcome them. Power was given him over all kindreds, tongues, nations. Keep going in people. So let's do this in this way. Rather than focus on one verse or 2 or 3 verses, I'm trying to give you a broad overview so you get the force, you get the direction of this. And we see where we're going. something has to strike a match. Something has to light a fuse. Something has to initiate the time of the end. If I look at Daniel's visions, we can go to Revelation, but I'm going to look at Daniel's visions. He has 4 visions. And here they are. The first vision is in 7. The third vision is in 9. His fourth vision is in 10 through 12. Well, what happened to his second vision? Well, it's right here. But I'm moving it out of this line. Why? Because it, by context, moves itself out of line here. And there is part A and part B. B. So what do we have here? We have the wind troubling the waters. That's war, strife, trouble. We have the lion and the bear and the leopard. But the bear doesn't raise himself up until the lion gets his wings plucked. So the first thing we can be looking for in this prophetic scenario is this king of beasts and king of the air, double dose of number 1, this superpower of the day is going to be acting. He's going to do something that's going to cause him to be humbled, to get his wings pulled off and his heart pulled out. And instead of being the ferocious king of beasts and the great lord of the air, he is going to be humble pie. And it is in the humbling of the lion that the bear rises and devours much flesh. It is in the atmosphere of a humbled lion, king, beast, if you will, that the swift rise of the leopard begins to take place. And then is seen this fourth or diverse beast and the little horn, etc., etc. Well, there's some crisis. And that crisis occurs right here in Daniel's second vision. Now, if you were to give careful time and attention to Daniel's 4 visions, you would see they're all about the same thing. It's just a repeat with enlargement. We're going to give you the broad overview in 7. Now we're going to enlarge on this and enlarge on that and enlarge on the other over here. When we get to the second vision, which is the vision of the ram and the goat, we have part A. That's the vision of the ram and the goat. In part B, we come to verse 7 and 8 in the second vision. And we have the little horn again. All of these visions are about the little horn and his activities. In chapter 8, the second vision, we have some advance information. We have been given a preview, if you will. We have been given light instruction as to watch when you see this, then this is what follows. Here's the match that lights the fuse on the time of the end. All right? This is what we were trying to say 25, 26 years ago. So let's talk about the ram and the goat. In Daniel's first vision, it's the first year of the reign of King Belshazzar. In Daniel's second vision, it's the third year of the reign of King Belshazzar. Who's Belshazzar? Last king of Babylon. Belshazzar's not gone yet. Handwriting on the wall, not yet. Third year of the reign of King Belshazzar. Where's Daniel? Daniel is an official of state. He is a person of authority and prestige in the Babylonian government. That's because he interpreted Nebuchadnezzar's dreams and on da-da-da-da-da-da. All right? But he's an old man now. And he's on state business. And where does he find himself? This is where we started this morning. Yes, this is where we started this morning. Remember? Mediterranean, Persian Gulf. We want to know where Daniel was, because in this vision he gives us a geographical fix. In this vision he gives us a chronological fix. I say he, Gabriel does. The book does, the vision does. So let's discover what's going on. Here's the Persian Gulf. It's the 3rd year of the reign of King Belshazzar. And Daniel says, I was at Shushan in the palace, which is in the province of Elam. Now you must remember the Babylonian Empire extended over many countries, we call them, of the world today. But they were part of this great empire. Shushan, or Susa, was about here in relation to the Persian Gulf. So look, just watch. Daniel is there on government business. I was in the palace, the province of Elam. All right? And he has a vision. And he says, and the King James makes this clear enough, but if you go back and check it in several versions, I mean, it's abundantly clear. He says, this vision is like the one I had seen at the beginning. Same elements. It's like. All right? This vision is like the one I saw at the beginning. Where was that? That was 2 years before. And what does he see? He says, in my vision, in my dream, I saw myself standing beside the river Ulai. U-L-A-I. Ulai. Now, it's no longer called the Ulai River. The modern name for it is the Karun River, K-A-R-U-N. And where is it? It originates up here in the highlands of southwestern modern-day Iran. And these waters flow out of the mountains and they come over here and they merge themselves with the 2 great rivers of this part of the world. The Tigris or Tigris and the Euphrates. Now in Daniel's book, these rivers come together and they become known as the Hiddekel. These waters merge themselves, these 2 great rivers merge and flow southward just, a few kilometers, a few miles. And this Ulai pours its waters in. Now, if you want a fix, we're talking about a geographical fix. If you want a fix on all of this, turn the news on and look for Basra. Put an H on it if you want. Basra. Because this second capital city of modern Iraq, Basra, is where these bodies of water come together. Why will that be important? Well, if we have enough time, we'll get there. But right now, we got to get Daniel and the Ulai together, and the ram and the goat. He says, in my dream, in my vision, I found myself standing beside the river, and I saw a ram with horns, it says. But we deduce that it's 2 because 2 horns and one's higher than the other. The higher comes up left. He has 2 horns. Now, this ram is doing something. He's pushing. Modern terminology, he's a bully. And he's pushing 3 directions of the compass. He's pushing north, he's pushing south, and he's pushing west. He's not pushing to the east. What does that tell you?
China and Rome.
His friends are which direction?
To the east.
Art thou listening?
Oh, good point.
He's bullying, he's pushing. North, south, west. Nobody likes it. It says he becomes great. A free translation there is he makes a name for himself. Everybody's watching. Takes note. All right? It says he did as he willed and he became great. Until somebody in which direction said, hey, enough is enough. Come on, from which direction?
West.
From the west. Not from the north, not from the south, not from the east. Somebody in the west said, hey. So as I was watching, Daniel said, I saw a rough goat. He-goat. I saw a rough goat. And he came from where?
West.
The west. And he came across the face of the...
Border.
And he touched not the...
Ground.
And he came to the ram which I had seen standing beside the river. And he ran unto him in the fury of his power. And he pulled his stature down and stamped on him. No, that's what it says. It says he threw the ram to the ground and stamped on him and brake what? Both his horns. Okay? But it goes on to say that the ram has two horns. One of the two horns is higher than the other, and the higher comes up last. Now, if that were the end of the story and the end of the vision, you and I could sit here and say, well, I think that's Mao Zedong, and I think that's, you know, the Queen of England, and I think that's... No. Gabriel shows up and says, Daniel, I have been instructed to come and give you understanding. Why? Because in verse 15, Daniel said, I saw and I heard, but I didn't understand. Verse 16, Gabriel, make this man to understand. Verse 17, Gabriel says, Daniel, you need to understand this. This vision is at 336 BC.
Time of the end. Ain't Alexander.
Do you have a Bible in front of you? Why don't you look at chapter 8 of Daniel and verse 17.
So the king near was the kingdoms.
Why don't you look at it and see what it says? So nobody can go away and say, that man said. No. That man didn't say anything. This is what Gabriel said. This is what the book says. Understand, O son of man, for at 336 is the time of the vision. BC. What does it say? Come on, somebody, let's get it on tape. For at the time of the shall be the... Now I keep harping on 336 because for 25 going on 30 years I have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people from any kind of denomination you want to name out there who want to come and they want to tell me that this is all about Alexander the Great. And I'm saying Alexander the Great was in 336 BC in the Battle of Arbela, which was 1,000 miles away from this geographical fix, and no. 336 BC is not the time of the... No. Where does this vision belong? The time of the end. Who said so? Gabriel. Who told Gabriel? God. So you and I, as we are approaching the time of the end, should be looking for the ram and the goat. Shouldn't we? Yeah. Yes, we should. By the way, you keep reading verse 19, Gabriel tells Daniel 2 more times. This is all about the time of the end and the appointed time of the end. In verse 20, Gabriel tells him who the ram with 2 horns represent, who the 2 horns are. The 2 horns are the kings of what? Media and Persia. But at the time of the... So they're not called Medes and Persians today. It's called Iraq and Iran. Have we seen any pushing going on over there? Saddam pushed Kuwait. And the Kurds. By the way, the Kurds are the modern descendants of the Medes. They're very proud of it. And it's very much in the news. All you have to do is read it. Modern Iraq is basically the heart and soul of the old Median Empire, which extended over into what's part of Turkey and Syria and Iraq. I know all of that. But the heart and soul of it is modern Iraq. And most of the Kurds are there in Iraq. Now there are two horns on this ram. And we keep talking about Iraq and Iran, but who is the ram? Islam, thank you. The ram is Islam. It's Islam that is pushing. Would anybody agree with that? Osama been pushing. Yes or no? Come on. Is there any element in this vision that's not fitting, that doesn't work, that's not coming to pass? Right down to where Daniel saw himself standing in the vision. And by the way, it's one of the few places on the planet where you can spin the globe and put your finger down and say, hey, there are kingdoms and there are nations. And they're all in a beef with one another. Listen, folk, the ram is Islam. Radical, militant Islam. The two horns that we're going to focus on, because the prophecy, the vision focuses on them, are the Medes and the Persians, Iraq and Iran. And they are thrown to the ground and broken. Has Saddam been thrown to the ground? Literally. The whole world watched it. Has Iran been thrown down and broken yet? No. No, 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 no. No. Now here is the real, here's the bomb in this whole thing. Because it's the he-goat coming from the west who is moved with choler. It says, that's old English. It means he's fit to be tied. It means he's mad as Butch. And that hasn't happened yet. We were mad, but not as Butch. So what can we expect to happen before we get mad as Butch?
Another terrorist attack.
There's something going to happen that is going to make us absolutely livid before we go to war with Iran, which could happen. Okay? They're going to do something that we can pin the tail on the donkey. We can say, they did it. And the world will know it, because it says when we go after them, nobody's going to help him. Nobody's going to come to his defense. And there was none to save him, it says. They're going to do something. Now, they really can't help it. It's in the genes. You understand this? Crazy people can't help being crazy. You forgive me. But I want to take you back to Genesis 16. Because all of this was written way back there for us upon whom the ends of the world are come. So I'm in Genesis 16. This is what happens when people try to help God out. You have a Bible. If you don't, you listen. We're going to read a few verses. Now Sarai, Abram's wife, bare him no children. She had a handmaid, an Egyptian, whose name was Hagar. Sarai said to Abram, behold, now the Lord hath restrained me from bearing. I pray thee, go in unto my maid. It may be that I may obtain children by her. And Abram hearkened to the voice of Sarai. So here we see trouble in the making. Here's the lighting of a fuse. All right? Here we are. This is how to make a bomb in one easy lesson. Why would Sarai say such a thing to Abram?
The times, that was part
Because if a woman was barren, she was considered what? Cursed of God. And if a man had a wife who could not and had not bore him a son. Daughters, women don't count. You have to understand that.
That was the culture of the
If he had not a son to carry his name after him, he was cursed as well. And there was a double curse resting on this house. She was barren, and he had no namesake. And Sarai is trying to help God out. Now, when I say help God out, on what basis do I say that? Because God had taken them over there and had given them the promise that what? They would have what? A son. You will have a son. But when 20 and 30 years get by and your joints get creaky and you figure God took a vacation and you're going to help him out. And that's where trouble always begins. Now, who was Hagar? Tells you. And she was and what? She was an Egyptian. Uh-oh. Uh-oh. What's the problem with being Egyptian?
Foreign woman.
What?
Foreign woman.
She was not a Hebrew. And God is doing something through this channel, this lineage. It's not that God doesn't love Egyptians. That becomes apparent if you keep reading. That's not the point of it here. God loves Babylonians. That's not the point of it. When finally there's a son born, his name is Ishmael. Abraham says, oh God, can't you accept Ishmael? No, 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 no. Why not? Because no son of a bondwoman. You need to understand what's going on here, folk. Prophetically and really, see, you need to understand what's going on here. Now, what we find is that as soon as Hagar has conceived and born a son, she looks at Sarah, what, down her nose. And what did she do? What was her feeling on the inside? That God has what? Lifted me up and put you down. And Sarai comes to Abraham, poor guy, always in the middle, and now he's really in the middle. All he's doing is following orders. And she says, okay, mister, here it is, in plain Hebrew. You're going to choose between Hagar and me. If she's going to be your wife, so be it. If I'm the wife, then I want to know it right now. And what is Abram's response? Come on. You remember? He says, you are my wife. And I give you all the rights and privileges that belong to my wife. What did she do?
Ran off the hand.
She ran over there and grabbed Hagar by the hair and said,
You're out of here.
Now, I think you know the story well enough to know that Hagar runs off out in the desert and she's crying and boo-hooing and all this kind of thing, and somebody hears her crying and says, what are you crying about? Well, my mistress did this and this and this and this, and I'm out here and I'm going to die and my baby's going to die and all this. No, your baby's not going to die. Your baby's going to live and he's going to grow up and be the father of 1.2 billion.
Mm-hmm.
Now somebody help me find that verse that says, and here it is. Verse 11. You have it? Chapter 16, Genesis, verse 11, verse 12. And the angel of the Lord said to her, behold, thou art with child and shalt bear a son and shalt call his name what? Ishmael, which means what? God hears, or God hath heard your cry. Because the Lord hath heard thy affliction. And he will be a what?
Wild.
Whoa. He will be a wild man. His hand will be against every man, and every man's hand against him. And he will dwell in the presence of all his brethren. Now, in plain English, this is what it says. He'll be a wild man, and he won't get along with anybody. He won't get along with his neighbors. He won't even get along with his own brothers. Would you say that was a prophecy? Would you say that was a good description of folks who run to church and blow everybody else up? Are you listening? Now, what we have is a situation in this part of the world where we have not centuries of hatred, but thousands of years of hatred, jealousy, envy, greed, murder, contempt, all those good things people do. And of course, the President of the United States is going to fix it with dollars. We must appreciate the gesture, but we better know the book. See? Now please listen. The Ishmaelites have always been opposed to the Isaacites. Why? Who was firstborn, Ishmael or Isaac? Who is supposed to receive the birthright? The firstborn. But the first doesn't get it. This is why in 700 AD, when Jews and Christians try to tell Muhammad what the Bible is all about, he decides to rewrite the story. It's called the Quran. Do you know what the Quran is? It's a revision of the Bible. That's what the Quran is. Through Muhammad's eyes and pen. And when Muhammad tells the stories in the Quran, he changes everything. He says that when Abraham went up on the mountain to offer his son, who did he take? Ishmael, not Isaac. When he says the birthright was given, it was not given to Isaac, it was given to Ishmael. And so these folk, they're not going to live together over there. Never. Never. Now, if you were betting folks, I'd take your money and run. It'll never happen. Not because of predestination, but because of it's written in the genes. And it's written in the book, see. It won't work. There's this bitter, 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 bitter hatred. And it's going to be there for how long? Until the world burns up. The whole study through the scripture of the first shall be last and last shall be first is all about this prophecy. There's Cain and Abel. Who's the firstborn? Cain. Who did God favor? Second. There's Ishmael and Isaac. Who's the firstborn? Ishmael. Whom did God favor? There's Esau and Jacob. Who's the firstborn? Whom did God favor? How many times you want to do this? Go tell Pharaoh, let my people go. Not going to do it. All right. You've had 9 chances. You don't have any more. This is what's going to happen. At midnight, the destroying angel is going to pass through the land. And everybody who's not behind closed doors and blood over the door, who dies?
Firstborn. Male.
Male.
Firstborn.
Was that inclusive of women?
I don't know, but it's firstborn. All of this is a prophecy. All of this is a prophecy. And you can take this right on through to the 1,000-year millennium in Revelation 20. We need to understand that we, at the time of the end, as Gentiles, as folks living on the other side of the world, are going to be drawn into this family feud. Like it or not, the whole world's going to be sucked into this vortex. This is why the Old Testament prophets have written, I will make Jerusalem a cup of trembling in the hands of the nations. Yeah, that's where we're going. That's where this is going. See, we must understand that the match that lights the fuse is the confrontation between the ram and the goat. And we must understand that the striking of the match is when the power from the west, with the notable horn, number one king leading the way, breaks that second higher horn, I ram. And then stands up and says, we told him, and we did it. It says of the goat, and when he was strong, the notable horn was, it actually says shattered.
How long do you think it'll be?
It's broken. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know if it's within days, within hours, within months, within a few years. But I want to tell you, the whole world economy is already,
They're going to blockade oil.
and if we go to war again over there, you might expect global markets to just deep six. Anything can happen now. We're going to get to that in a few minutes. What I'm asking you to see is the match and where it's struck. And the consequences are the time of the end. Now, in further discussion this evening, that will be, well, is it 7 years, is it 3.5, and what have you, okay? What we need to do is look at the context of the ram and the goat and be assured, you and I, that the breaking, shattering of the notable horn has something to do with the United States of America. If we go back in history, we take a lesson from the Roman Empire and wars and battles that were fought between the Romans and other nations. And at a certain time in Roman history, a battle was fought in which the Romans won the battle but lost the war. And that is referred to in the history books as a Pyrrhic victory. It's an overreaching. You win, but you lose. And what is clearly described in this second vision given to Daniel is that the confrontation of the ram and the goat is a Pyrrhic victory. The goat from the west comes and he wins, but he loses. In the winning, he loses. And I saw, and the notable horn was shattered. It's broken. Well, how can we deduce, you and I, that this notable horn has anything at all to do with the United States of America? Well, what we want to do is parallel 7 and 8. What we see is a lion with eagle wings, and what happens to him?
It's plucked.
Okay? Now, the consequence of these events in the first vision lead us to the rise of the little horn. When we come to the second vision, what do we have? Ram and the goat. Confrontation. Shattering of the notable horn on the goat. And what is the consequence? Next verse, rise of the little horn. So first of all, we want to see the parallel. Secondly, we see by the figures, the symbols that are, appointed in here, that a lion is king of beasts. Even the world uses those expressions. And the eagle is Lord of the air. All right. Here is a double dose of number 1. Now, when we get to the notable horn on the rough goat from the west, okay? Gabriel says, now the rough goat is the
King of Grecia.
king of Grecia, which has been freely interpreted by zillions as Greece. But we'll show you that Grecia is not Greece. Doesn't mean that. Didn't mean that. And the notable horn is the which king?
First king.
Is the first king. So, what we have, the basic interpretation of the ram and the goat is that this all goes back to the Battle of Arbela, which was fought between Alexander and the Medo-Persian powers back there in 336 BC. And Alexander beat him up, and he ruled the world for that brief period of time in there, about 3.5 years, as a matter of fact, till he drank himself to death. Well, here are the problems with Alexander the Great. First of all, Gabriel says this vision belongs where?
Time of the end.
So Alexander don't fit. Pardon my Alabama English. Alexander won't work. Number two, Alexander was not the first king. His father Philip was the first king. Alexander came second. So the expression, even if you want it to be Alexander, does not mean first king like 1, 2, 3, 4, but first in the sense of he's number 1. He's the number 1 guy on the block, okay? It's not first like 1, 2, 3, it's first like he's number 1. Now, if we're going to bring this down to the time of the end, and if we're going to take the symbols that are employed, and we're going to take the parallels in these passages, and we're going to put them all together, I submit to you that the notable horn is the United States of America. We're the number 1 guy on the block. We are the first king among kings. And we're coming from the west. With who? The lion. And we've already beat up 1 horn, and we're on the way to number 2. Now, if you can fit the king of Siam in there, you know, have at it. I don't think this is multiple choice. I think this is pretty plain, if you really want to see. Well, how do you get economic collapse out of all of this? Well, you have to keep reading in the chapter, in the vision. And you have to go on to Daniel 11, which is the 4th vision. And you have to put this together with Revelation. And every time you do, you will find that it has to do with money, bucks, dollars, cents, prosperity, wealth, crisis. But before I just plain show you, let's do it again from a different direction. In the New Testament, Matthew 24, Mark 13, Luke 21. We have this one conversation of Jesus and the disciples, his disciples, Mount of Olives, look at the temple, time of the end of the world. In Luke 21, we have this expression. Jesus is speaking. I'm quoting from the King James. Upon the earth, distress of nations with perplexity, the sea and the waves roaring. People, men's hearts failing them for fear and for looking after the things that are coming upon the earth. Now, I just quoted the King James verbatim. What you might do sometime is compare that passage, Luke 21, and those 3 or 4 verses in there. You might compare that in several different translations or versions.
Harmony of Gospels would be a good one to do that one.
That's in Luke 21. You might want to look it up in some of the very modern renderings. But one offering goes something like this. We're talking about the time of the end. We're talking about the woman who's about to go through the pain of giving birth. And one translation, I shouldn't say translation, one rendering goes something like this. The time will come when the nations cannot pay their bills and there will be no way out. you'll find this same prophecy pointed to by James over in the book of James in the New Testament, where he says, "Go to now, ye rich men, weep and howl for your miseries that are come upon you, for you have heaped treasure together for the last days. Your gold and silver are cankered, and the rust of them." See, gold and silver don't canker and don't rust. What are they talking about? What's going on here? That's why people worship gold and silver, because they don't oxidize, they don't rust, they don't whatever. What it's saying is, there's a time coming when gold and silver, we're going to go off of any gold, silver standard. We're going to go on a world economy, a global economy that's going to be set up in the time of the end. You have to understand the context in all of this. Now, if you keep reading in chapter 8 of the book of Daniel, get on over to verse 23 and thereabout, you will find that there arises a king of fierce countenance, and he is going to practice craft, and he's going to do these various things, and he's going to deceive many, and he is going to offer them something. Somebody find that verse and tell me what it says. He offers. What does it say?
23?
23, 24, 25. Tell me about the man with the king with fierce countenance. He does what?
It says, "In the latter time of their kingdom, when the transgressors are come to a full, a king of fierce countenance,
shall,
understanding dark sentences shall
yeah,
stand up."
that's miraculous working, miracle working power is what that means. But go on.
"And his power shall be mighty, but not by his own power. And he shall destroy wonderfully, and shall prosper in practice, and shall destroy the mighty and the holy people." That's God's people.
He shall overcome many with what?
Craft.
No, with peace. Doesn't it say with something?
Peace destroy many.
All right. By peace he will destroy many. Would you look in the margin? Somebody look in the margin and tell me what the word actually is right there.
Prosperity.
Prosperity. That's right. This is the same old Hitler story. It's over and over again. We got a crisis. We want a savior. We want a way out. Everybody's pocketbook is threatened on the planet. Somebody come tell us how to get out of this mess. And he's going to come. Who the he is another discussion by and by. Yes.
Meaning we're hungry.
Yeah, we're frightened to death. We're going to lose everything. The whole world's going to melt down, and everybody's going to kill one another trying to save a scrap of food and a scrap of gold. And we want somebody to come say peace, peace. And in the New Testament, when they shall say peace and safety. And by the way, if you'll look in the margin, it says, "And when they shall say peace and prosperity, sudden destruction comes." All right? Now, folk, my interpretation may be faulty, may be off the wall, may be completely wrong, but for 25 plus years, this is how I've read it, and this is how I've shared it, and I'm not ready to change my tune. All right? The day will come, you watch and see. There's going to be a crisis in the Middle East. And Iraq and Iran are going to make trouble. And people in the West are going to become very angry about it, and the United States and Great Britain are going to get together as principals in a coalition, and they're going to come over there, and we're going to beat up Iraq first, and then we're going to beat up Iran. I'm just not willing to ride any other horse than that one, or goat, or whatever it is. All right? And when we have broken the second higher horn, we will have overreached. We will win, but we will lose. Because when we do it, our own economy will. And that's where you and I need to talk for a moment. I got to give you a break. I don't want to, but I've got to. You and I have never known poverty. Some in this room may disagree with that statement, but you and I have never known poverty. The poorest person in this country, you need to go travel in the real world. The poorest people in this country live like kings compared to most of the world. Now that's a fact. It's true when we compare ourselves among ourselves. Some are much more fortunate, Bill Gates, than others. $46.4 billion. Anyhow, you and I don't know what it means to be poor. We're living in the golden age of the American dream. We've seen the best of it, which means we're going to see the worst of it. That's the way the cookie crumbles, folks. You get the best, you deserve the worst. And we're going to see it. There's no question about it. It's going to happen. Now here's the problem. The problem is you and I don't know how to behave under those circumstances. And we would like to think that when hard times come and bad times come that people get sweet. But I want to tell you, bad people get worse. And they go out and they take whatever they need to stay alive. Whatever they think you have. And this is not the time to be living in downtown New York or downtown anywhere. I'm just telling you right now. He that hath ears to hear, let him hear. There's a reason why when Jesus talked to the disciples about the end, he said, get out of town, boys. It's in the book for a reason. This is why when the angels showed up down in Sodom, they said, Lot, book it. Listen, folk, we don't know how to operate under these kinds of circumstances. We're talking about a total economic collapse. We're talking about a time in the near future when Uncle Sam cannot send a check. And you got a gazillion people in this country who can't even get through 30 days out of the month. And if they don't get that check, hey, what are they going to do? You tell me. When there are mobs, roving, wild men standing on the highways with guns, stealing what's in the trucks on the way to the cities to feed the people. You think it ain't going to happen in this country? You think it can't happen? You think it never will happen? That means it'll probably happen tomorrow. I don't want to frighten anyone. I want to scare the daylights out of everybody. No, really, fear is not good motivation. This is what prophecy is for. In the book of Habakkuk, write the vision on tables, make it plain, so that he that readeth it may run. Though the vision tarry, wait for it will come. It will come. It's in the book. It's going to come, not because brother so-and-so, anybody says so. It's going to come because it's in the book. And the scripture cannot be broken. Because what was written 2,600 years ago is happening not just under our noses. I mean, it's happening all around us. The handwriting is on the wall. $30 trillion we are in debt in this country. Combined public and private debt in this, one version said 40 trillion. I'll take 30. Wow. You don't know what a trillion is. You don't know what a billion is. I don't know what a million is. It's going to happen. Now here's the thing, folks. If you look at the composite beast, this ugly critter right here, he has the body of a leopard. He has the feet of a bear, and he has the mouth of a lion.
All come together.
And I say, okay, that mouth of a lion, who is that?
America. You UN.
If the lion has eagle's wings, Who's the eagle?
America.
Who's the lion?
England?
Is England part of the European Union?
No,
No,
no.
not yet.
Yeah. They're part of the European Union, but they have not gone on the what? Euro.
Oh,
But if we have a collapse, then the lion becomes part of. And what troubles me, I'm talking about at the personal level, what troubles me about this ugly thing right here is that I can't find the eagle in the picture. And what that suggests to me is you and I are not about to be broke. We're about to be.
you think we should get out of this country?
No. Take my word for it, brother. There's no place on the planet better. We're in meltdown. We're going over the edge now.
See him going after Iran?
And all these troubles are not going to cease till Jesus comes. Okay? And except the Lord hide us, we're not hidden. Except the Lord preserve us, we're not preserved. But that doesn't mean we just sit around and twiddle our thumbs and say, well, the Lord's going to take care of me, and the Lord's going to feed me, and the Lord's going to do all of this. This is what you're going to find in the prophecies, and this is what you're going to find in the book. God is not really concerned about the body. Jesus said so. God is concerned about the spiritual part of man. And that's what He's saving. He is not saving the body. Check it out in the book. God leaves it to us to take care of, and He takes care of the soul. We're supposed to work to get bread, to feed ourselves. And I meet too many Christians, you forgive me, but I meet too many Christians in my travels who think they're on easy street because they're Christians and they don't need to worry about anything. They don't need to make provision for anything. They don't see a time coming when they're going to have to grow something to eat. You see, when the Great Depression struck the world, and this nation in particular, back in the late 20s and the 30s, when the Great Depression occurred, 70% of the population of the United States lived in the country, and 30% lived in the city. Today, 70 to 80% live in the cities, and a small fraction, 15 to 30%, live in rural environments. We have a whole generation of people in this country who believe that food grows in the local supermarket. In 1957, my family moved to Mobile, Alabama. In 1957, neighbors 4 doors from us moved to Mobile, Alabama from Brooklyn, New York. My neighbor friend and I went to high school together. He moved from Brooklyn, New York to Mobile, Alabama. He said, you know, on the way to Mobile, our plane landed in Nashville, and we were just really surprised. I said, you were? Yeah. He said, we saw people when the plane landed and they had shoes on. He said, we thought when we landed in Nashville, we were going to see folks running around in coveralls and barefooted. And he was serious. Bill Cohen, my neighbor friend, my buddy, was 16 years of age. He never saw a cow in his life until he was 14 years old, and his class in Brooklyn, New York took a field trip to the country. And he saw a cow for the first time in his life. This is the generation we're in. We've got a country full of people who haven't got a clue about how food is grown and where it comes from. And we're about to have a country, I greatly fear, where the social upheaval that is on the way is it's unthinkable. I believe that as a result of terrorism, as a result of social upheaval, I believe that ere long, if I wanted to drive from Alabama to Medina, Ohio, I would probably have to have some kind of government permit to get on the road, and I can guarantee you it would be as it is in Mexico and what I met in the Middle East and other parts of the world. I would be stopped on the highway time after time after time by men with submachine guns saying, "Papers. Who are you? Where are you going? What is your business?" See, you and I don't think in these terms. There is something about these prophecies right here that make me all jello-y in the knees.